Hey everybody, welcome to the TEConnect podcast. I'm John Martin.
And I'm Dean Reverman.
And that is Sam Hughes.
Way!
Hey!
All right.
And you know why Sam is here? I know we just had her on the last episode also.
Oh, well, yeah.
But if you can't, again, if you're watching the video, you should have figured out what's happening by now. I've got the Star Wars shirt on.
Dun, dun, dun,
We've got an Ahsoka bobblehead up here, a Funko Pop.
Yes, a Funko Pop. Yes.
Dean's making some music that's not Star Wars.
Yes, it was.
Was it?
Yes.
Didn't sound like it. Whatever.
It
Copyright.
was John Williams of some sort.
I'm not.
But, that's okay.
It's our Star Wars episode. It's our third annual Star Wars Nerd Spectacular.
And we've got so much to talk about.
We do.
I mean,
because if you're a Star Wars fan, there's no dearth of content right now.
Exactly.
There's plenty to be
How
watching.
can you not be a
and
fan
enjoying,
at this point?
Even though there's no movies. There's no movies, and yet there's so
They
much
don't
Star
need
Wars
them.
stuff going on.
They don't need them. I've gotten so much information here in the last year.
Exactly.
Good stuff.
So we're going to be talking about what's going on in Star Wars,
Yes.
how much content has been out of last year.
Yes.
We're talking Book of Boba Fett. We're talking Obi-Wan Kenobi. We're talking Tales of the Jedi. We're talking Andor. We're talking about what's coming next. We're talking about an expensive drink. We're talking about are the prequels cool again?
What?
We've got so
Wait,
much
did you
to
say
talk about.
prequels are cool again?
Maybe. I don't know. That's what we're going to discuss.
I can't believe that just came out of your mouth, but go ahead.
By the way, this is a spoilerific episode, all right? Just so you understand.
Well, we have to.
If
We
you're
have to
not
explore
caught
it.
up on stuff, we're going to be doing a lot of spoilers. We may not be spoiling all of Andor because Sam isn't quite caught up. So we'll try to keep it moderate on at least the last half of
Fair
Andor.
enough. Okay.
Or maybe we'll just send Sam out of the room.
Sam
to finish
gets out of
that
the room because
conversation.
I need some. You got to explain some stuff on that one to me anyway. But anyway,
all
go
right.
ahead.
So we got a lot to cover, and this probably will be a long episode. It's our last of the year also, though. We're having fun. We're here to have fun and talk about Star Wars. It's time to plug in and get connected.
Welcome to the TEConnect podcast. It's time to get connected.
All right, let's get into it. By the way, also, producer Marco will once again be available.
You may
on the
hear a
mic
voice.
to weigh in from time to time. He won't let himself be on camera as always, but he will be on mic throwing in from time to time and wrecking our opinions on stuff probably. So I wanted to kick things off first of all with something absurd. Go to the show notes. There's a link to check out about this. There's a drink that is available on the Disney cruise, their Star Wars themed cruise. This is not the same as the Star Wars hotel.
Oh, I thought it was in the hotel.
No, it's not.
Okay,
I thought it was at first too. It's not the same thing. It's
okay.
actually one of their cruises, their actual cruise
So
lines.
you can get this right now on the cruise.
Yes. So they have a Star Wars themed cocktail called the Kyber Crystal, which I'm going to assume if you're listening to this, you know what Kyber crystals are. It's what goes in the lightsabers and powers them up and everything.
It's not midichlorian.
Exactly. So they have a drink called the Kyber Crystal that costs $5,000.
Just pennies and change.
Just pennies and change. Now now mind you, this also does include a trip to the Skywalker Ranch and the Skywalker Vineyards.
Just the vineyards at the ranch.
That's a good point. So I don't know if you get to hang out at the ranch itself.
You
if
ain't
it's just
hanging
the
out at the
vineyards.
ranch.
I still don't know that that's worth it, obviously. As much as I would like to visit Skywalker Ranch. The drink contains Casmus cognac, the yuzu citrus fruit, and more. And apparently has some, Pappy Van Winkle in there also?
Yes, a really good bourbon.
Which is if you're a bourbon person, it's a...
Which shots
Here's the
alone,
thing.
like a bottle goes for thousands
I'm
of
not
dollars.
going to say that Pappy's like the greatest bourbon ever.
I've
made
never
or
had
anything.
it. Yeah.
It's all right. It's fine. And I'm sure there's people that'll say that's sacrilege. It's one of those things that the bourbon companies have managed to hype up certain bourbons.
Of course. Yeah.
To make them super expensive, even though they're not necessarily.
Well, how else are you going to
that much
justify
better.
$5,000? You got to throw some bourbon in there that people will spend $2,000 to get a bottle on.
So check out the article because there's a video in here that also shows like you get it in a cool little container that
I
you
like
open
the
up.
container.
Yeah,
that's the only thing. It's not
neat.
worth the $5,000.
Right.
But it is pretty dang cool, right? Because it looks like it's a Star Wars-esque container.
Right.
You press a little
Right.
button on the and like the doors come
Exactly.
down, smoke comes out.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's neat, but yeah, it's.
Not for that much money.
Not in
I
for
guess if
$5,000.
I had $5,000 to waste on Star Wars stuff, sure, I'd probably do it. But
Yeah.
it's just.
But the total package still doesn't have you in there. So
No.
you're getting the Pappy, you're getting the experience, and then you get to go to the vineyard Which I guess you have to pay your way to get there.
Probably.
You just get a ticket there, but you still got to. So this $5,000 drink is now a plane ticket. And another hotel.
Again, if you're spending $5,000 on this, you
that.
probably have enough money for all this other stuff. You don't care.
Yeah. Or you're just trying to get the social,
And not to mention whatever you spent to get on the cruise. I'm sure the cruise cost you thousands of dollars too.
Yeah. Disney cruise? Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
Come on now.
Get me started.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Have you done a Disney cruise yet?
No, I don't. I'm a landlocked lady.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
I'm right there with you.
But we all know how expensive Disney is. So just imagine the plus on a cruise.
Oh, God. I can only imagine.
So this is one of those Star Wars things that just a little too far for my taste.
That's fair.
I don't think I'm going to be having a Kyber crystal drink.
That's fair.
Sounds like I could give me practically the ingredients. I could probably make my own. Yeah,
snap.
exactly.
Thanks for the recipe. Steal.
Well, if you were the owner, like that guy owned FTX, that the Bitcoin thing that just collapsed, he had oodles of dollars.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah. Speaking of Star Wars drinks, back in the day, one of my favorite mixed drinks to make for friends, I called it the Blue Milk. Star Wars.
Nice!
And basically, it was just blue pucker with a bunch of other stuff mixed in. Remember pucker? Remember that drink?
Yes. How could you mix that with anything?
I don't know idea. I dumped vodka in there. Who knows what else? It was just
that might not sit well in your stomach.
Probably not. It was one of those things when we have Star Wars marathons. I just throw those drinks together and. Whatever.
Did you put a flashlight behind it to try to make it look and glow?
Yeah, sure. Probably.
Yeah. Way more affordable is the Oga's Cantina in Galaxy's Edge in Disney World, which they have a little bar and it's kind of a vibe. There's some.
Is it that vibe?
Yeah. Most Leicester type feel. Yeah.
They got some.
Can you get any kind of drink that has smoke coming out?
Totally, like fizzy things.
Yes.
Yeah, and they.
I gotta go.
That's what the hotel thing, the Galactic Star Cruise. They've got a lot of themed drinks and stuff like that too, which again are probably expensive, but not that expensive.
It's very in theme. They call you a traveler. They're like, "Welcome, travelers." And where are you coming in from?
Yes.
And, you make this mistake of saying Northern Kentucky, and they're like, "What the heck is that?" Sorry, I was thinking you were going to say Mos Eisley or some.
What universe?
The Midwest.
What is the land of Kentucky?
The Midwest belt.
Exactly.
Universe, yes.
All right. Well, as I mentioned up front, it's been a very busy year for Star Wars content, and again. Even without a new movie. We haven't had a new movie since what? 2019? Was that when Rise of Skywalker came out?
Oh, gosh.
So we're running on 3 years now without a new film. And we don't even have one scheduled in the future at this moment. But
wait, seriously? I thought there was supposed to be one. Like last year, you told me maybe in 2 years, 3 years.
But there's still been no official dates yet. There's stuff in the works, but no official dates. But we've had plenty of shows.
But to your point, do they need
Disney
to
Plus.
at this point?
That was part of our discussion last year.
It was.
Is it fine for Star Wars just to be a TV thing at this point?
I mean, the production value of what we're going to be talking about here today is on par.
I promise you, the Obi-Wan series and Andor probably too. Probably both cost as much as the original Star Wars and Empire put together, most likely.
Oh, for sure.
I'm sure the budgets were huge compared to the old films.
Good stuff. Yeah.
So, what do you guys think about this? Do you think we have is this the right amount of Star Wars content? Is it too much? Is it too little? Should we be backing off? Do we need a breather?
Sam?
I think it's just the right amount. I mean, honestly, we have a little bit of some live action things. We've got some animated things, and I think. It was nice for last year. I think we talked about it where we had that the anime perspective of a lot of the
visions.
Yeah, visions and how that was kind of a different arena there. But I think honestly, just with everything that's come out from filling in some plot holes, I've always said that. But I just think that everything that we have is the right amount for me.
Yeah, but what I wonder about, so I'm not much into the animated side of it, but the live action feels like enough, but I'm worried that they're going to be able to keep up that pace. Because we have been filling in a lot of the blanks and starting to develop some of these storylines, and that's good. I know you probably don't have any fear that they're going to run out of because you're right. Because in the Star Wars universe, you can just keep creating stories and
when we get to Andor, we'll talk about that because I feel like Andor is the first example of hey, we can really take new directions with Star Wars set in this universe, but do very different kind of stories.
Okay,
and I think that's kind of maybe where we're headed. We're still going to get plenty more Jedi stuff and Force stuff or whatever. Yeah. Yes. But I mean,
I feel like it's just right though. I
do too.
In fact, they released them, but I felt like I was able to keep up and stuff like that. It felt like.
And I will say, let's be honest, the current stuff, the stuff that's on Disney Plus, is very much for the fans. I think for more. I'm not saying you can't be a casual person and enjoy some of it, and jump in on some of these. But I think, unlike and we talked about this before too, the films. I think now you get to the point where the films have a built-in kind of almost terrifying necessity to have a mass appeal because again you're going to make movies that cost hundreds of millions to make and market And then the expectation is going to be like, this has to basically be a top 10 or top 20
Absolutely.
all-time film
Yeah.
in order to be considered as successful.
Right.
And I can kind of see why Disney's probably like, hey, we need to make sure we have a slam-bang, amazing film before we get back into the theaters again.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have to bring in a bunch of people that aren't the people that are watching all this stuff on Disney Plus.
Quick
right
sidebar: didn't Disney just bring back the old CEO?
Bob Iger, he's
Yes.
back.
Where did he land on the Star Wars
I
franchise?
don't know. He's an animation guy, which is why a lot of people are pumped about him being back because there's been a feeling that like Star Wars, or the Disney animation has been pretty mediocre.
Okay.
Other than Pixar, which they don't really own anymore, they just kind of collaborate with them now. So I think a lot of people are pumped about Iger coming back because he was very part of the group that helped spearhead a lot of the amazing animation that Disney was doing over the last 20 years or so before Chapek took over.
Gotcha.
As far as the parks go, too, he was pretty more hands-on with
that's true.
A lot of people, like the reservation process of like you couldn't park hop as many times anymore because of COVID and everything. But with a lot of that like clearing up, Chapek was like, no, it's easier for us to like track how many people are in what park and whatnot. But it ended up becoming more of a burden because if you couldn't get a reservation, you weren't going. And they were really strict about that. So everything. From the park standpoint and like taking vacations and things like that, Iger's definitely people are like stoked about
people
that.
seem pretty pumped that he's back in the fold again. He seems like it's a good thing.
Which is
I was just worrying about the Star Wars.
I don't know. Like I don't know if because I don't know, was he still there when they got Star Wars? Or?
I can't remember when they subbed him
Well,
out.
ultimately, but getting back to your point, would he not be the one that's signing off on this mega $1 million production?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
I mean, and again, with the fact that they're so big into he's big into animation, I wonder almost if you might see a Star Wars animated film, which we've had one. We had the Clone Wars film that
so
nobody
archaic.
remembers or saw.
Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
exactly. And if you saw, and if that was all you saw, you probably thought the series was going to be awful. But the series is actually amazing. The movie is kind of terrible. Yeah. All right. Well, then I think we're all in agreement. We're getting enough of what we want, and we're pretty satisfied we're getting here. So let's start talking about specifics here. So when we left off last year, we were anticipating the release of the Book of Boba Fett, which is coming out at the end of the year.
Yes.
It started, I think, very late December and went through January and February, I think, of this year. So let's talk about that first. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Because I feel like of all the Star Wars projects this year, that's probably the one that's had the least amount of fanfare, is probably the most mixed reactions. A little more on the negative side than probably the other stuff that's come out. How did you guys feel about the Book of Boba Fett?
I loved it. I grew up. Well, I mean, I loved Boba Fett in the oldies, right? Yeah, the ones that
the original trilogy,
the original.
OG,
I mean, I just loved everything and that he stood for, and I loved Jango Fett and all of the I just loved that like guild that he was in and all of that, and I love the actor a lot too, and I love his like what he does for his culture and Maori and everything. But I loved it. I loved the score. I just loved it. Yeah. But not a lot of people did. And I feel like Boba Fett was fan service.
Yeah.
But for a lot of ways with Cad Bane coming in and all of that, I was kind of like upset about his demise because it feels like that great of a character, but maybe he's not actually dead. Was there a body? Who knows?
He looked pretty dead.
Yeah, but I don't know. You need a body check. But I loved it. I literally did.
Okay. So. What were your thoughts on it?
I liked it. Stylistically, it gave me a Western feel, right? And you've talked about like how they can explore different feels.
Star Wars is a place.
Star Wars is a place.
You can tell a Western story set in Star Wars. You can tell a love story set in Star Wars.
It felt very isolated, in the sense that, a lot of the story was around that and that part of it. I loved that part of it. I loved the backstory. I like his character and kind of fleshing it out a little bit, because I don't feel like you got a lot in the original movies, about him,
right?
And in the whole where he came from.
You weren't supposed to.
You weren't supposed to, right? But it's good to have some of that backfill. He actually turned out to be a little bit of a different character than I thought,
right?
So there was some good in that, but yeah, I mean, in general, I thought it was pretty good. It's interesting though that he's going back. When you kind of walk through the whole chronology of what they're offering up, and let me get your take. What did you think about it before we start going there?
I'm a little mixed.
You are?
I did enjoy it. Don't get me wrong. It's not that I didn't like it. I think I actually we were talking about this before we went on mic. The whole back to tank, him flashing back to what happened post Return of the Jedi, how he got out of the Sarlacc, met up with the Tusken Raiders, the Sand People, or whatever, and developed this relationship and kind of Dances with Wolves. They basically did a Dances with Wolves story with him.
Oh, absolutely, right.
He becomes embedded in their culture and becomes one of them essentially. I liked all of that stuff. I really did. I think the story of him trying to take over Jabba's
You didn't
empire,
like that part.
I wasn't feeling that as much. I think part of it also is I am so done with Tatooine.
Oh.
And I know we're going to have more Tatooine here, obviously, when we talk about Obi-Wan here in a moment.
But we need to get off that planet, was what you're saying?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the fact that we keep coming back to this planet.
But it's so central to all these stories.
I know, but I mean, come on, but why? Just
wasn't Luke there for
Anakin and Luke both? It's fascinating to me that this one planet somehow is like practically this planet that's supposed to be the farthest from anything of interest in the galaxy, as they say in the original movie, and yet so much critical stuff seems to happen here. But whatever.
So what is the connection? Why is he trying to take over Jabba's world? I mean,
because he worked for Jabba and basically, like, I guess felt slighted maybe or whatever.
He's trying to have his own syndicate. He's just trying to be the boss of his own thing.
Yeah, and he was well. Plus, like the
but I think he's a better boss than the syndicate, right?
Yes.
Right. Well, the syndicate took over, ended up slaughtering the Tuskens.
Yes, right.
And obviously, he wanted vengeance for that, and he wanted to go in and basically take over and be like, I'm going to do this the right way, where we're sort of still a crime syndicate, but we're not the really bad crime syndicate. I don't know.
Family friendly.
Yeah. Exactly.
I was surprised at how good of a negotiator his character turned out. He negotiates with everybody.
Yeah.
And he does it really, really well, but for the right? And I thought that was a kind of an interesting angle. But anyway,
But I think then the other part of what really not annoyed me about it, because I liked it, was that as you got to the end of the season, suddenly the last few episodes turned into Mandalorian season 2.5.
Yes.
It did.
I mean, all of a sudden, and granted, now after this, when people were talking about like, well, what's going on here? Why is this suddenly a Mandalorian show and not a Book of Boba Fett?
I agree that was a little jarring when
there was.
Go ahead.
But if the thing is, what someone pointed out is if you go back almost a year or so back during the early days of Mandalorian, when they were wrapping up season 2 of Mandalorian, someone like during a Disney investor call when they were talking about what was coming next for Star Wars and all their other Disney content, someone in charge of Lucasfilm basically said, hey, the next stage of the Mandalorian saga continues in December of 2021. And at the time, people just assumed that meant Mandalorian season 3 was going to be out. But instead, they dropped Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah.
And basically, someone pointed out, like, that's what he was talking about. Like, because that story directly comes out of Mandalorian season 2 when you were reintroduced to Boba Fett, and you end it with the teaser for Book of Boba Fett. All of that was set up in that. So there's no reason to think like this shouldn't have been a Mandalorian story. It just was kind of jarring.
People weren't paying attention.
I didn't mind. Like when there was a random episode that was suddenly all about the Mandalorian, did not have Boba Fett anywhere in it, I think until maybe the very end of the episode.
Yeah, it was like
and then
6
suddenly he's
like
a huge part of all this. And then, but again, we're suddenly getting stuff with Luke. We're getting stuff with him creating the Jedi Temple. We get Ahsoka. We get more Baby Yoda. Like all of this suddenly just felt like it was like
too much.
It just felt like we had it felt like we had a series about Boba Fett, and then suddenly they were like, hey, we need to shove some Mandalorian stuff in there. It was kind of a bridge between this and the next season. But we did that
so that he could be there at the end.
I know, and I get that.
But at the time, it was very
I don't
jarring.
have any issue with that stuff because I loved all that stuff, and I loved seeing more of Ahsoka. I loved seeing Luke again. It just felt like we watched two different series that kind of got hobbled together into one. Whereas I feel like in a way it's like they wanted to tell this what happened to Boba Fett after Return of the Jedi, because everyone always wanted to know. Everyone there was a long time everyone was shipping, if you want to call it that, Boba Fett's return. That has been one of the most iconic things in the expanded universe of Star Wars before Disney took over. Is how did Boba Fett get out and what did he do after the fact?
Yes, exactly.
And so everyone always wanted to have that. And I feel like that was the story they wanted to tell there.
Which they
by
did
the
well.
way, this series also incorporated. If you've ever heard, there was at one point in time there was going to be a Star Wars series called Underworld. This was back in like the mid 2000s before Lucasfilm took over. There was people were working on ideas for new Star Wars content, and there was an idea for a show called Underworld, which was supposed to explore the seedier side of the Star Wars universe.
Okay,
and it was going to feature Boba Fett pretty prominently.
I gotcha.
And apparently, a lot of stuff got ported over from some ideas from that show that ended up falling into this one. So I feel like someone wanted to tell that story, but then someone else said, "But yeah, we want to do more Mandalorian type stuff too."
Yeah,
and they somehow
there's a lot to explore there too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what a challenge for the folks at Disney then, because they how do you tell the Mando story, which was needed at the last episode of Boba Fett, but do you release a couple Mando series, episodes?
Right,
And
right.
How do you do that?
Yeah, it
Anyway.
did just
Without
feel
it
like they
feeling
just
like
took-
filler. But
Yeah.
it's like important filler.
But it was important. At the time, you didn't realize it. I do remember that being like, what the hell are we doing here?
And granted, like I remember watching that episode and being like, this has been the best episode of this series so far.
The Mando one? The first Mando one?
Yeah, but
Yeah,
then
yeah,
also I'm like, but
Childless
why?
Mando came out like hot out of that like butcher, like wherever he was, he just like broke past those.
Oh yeah.
That like, and he had a spear. I was like, whoa, man,
Dark
upgrade.
saber. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So good stuff. And don't get me wrong, I
No,
like it.
That's fair.
I will
That's
say
fair.
I don't know. Like there hasn't been any discussion about more Boba Fett stuff. Do you guys want any more? Because I
don't think I need any more.
I don't think I need
It was a
any
nice
more.
close.
Yeah.
Unless
The way they-
unless
you wanna
that
have
world
him
now is
pop
going
up
to collide
somewhere-
with something, because if to your
Right.
point, if he's supposed to be this underworld, caricature,
Right.
and we need to explore that some more, it wouldn't be
kind of
surprising.
like the good
down-
mobster of sorts,
right? It wouldn't be surprising to me that there's going to be something there.
Yeah,
Right? In the
I
future.
won't be surprised if he shows up. Him or Fennec Shan, somebody's going to show up in something else. We're not. I guarantee we're
Fennec
not.
Shan,
done
what
with
do you
him.
think about that character? I mean, that's I
That's
was
my girl. That's
yeah, I liked her a
Ron.
lot.
Yeah.
But there's still room there, for her.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, I like her a lot. And you put what's the actress name? Ming Na Wen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Put her in everything.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I love her. She is the official
She can do
she's the
anything.
icon of Disney because she's been a Disney princess.
Oh.
She's been in Marvel. she was on Agents of Shield, and now she's a Star Wars character.
the quadfecta.
She's like just like the queen of Disney at this point.
yes,
So.
yes.
All right, I'm gonna turn to Marco for a second. Marco, you want to weigh in real quick on Book of Boba Fett? What were your thoughts on it?
Good, bad, indifferent.
No, I agree with you, John. It felt like two different things trying to come together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So enjoyable, but not quite seamless. Like I will say, I do think of all the stuff we're going to talk about, that was probably my least favorite Star Wars project this year, and
Okay.
yet I still think it's fantastic Star Wars stuff.
But those episodes, the Mando episodes, were really good.
Oh yeah, like
They-
if you
they were
just
really
honestly,
good.
I
If
think
you separated
I would
them-
say I think you could easily watch The Mandalorian and then skip all the other Boba Fett stuff and just
absolutely.
watch like the last
Yes.
3 episodes that
Yes.
he's part of,
Yes.
and I think you'd be fine.
Yeah.
You'd get enough context, you'd know what was going on. And,
Agreed.
And not to mention the fact, I think if you want to understand, especially wherever the hell season 3 of Mandalorian is going to go, you have to have seen that because
Now,
you're
you
going to be
have
like,
to,
wait a
yes.
minute, why is Grogu back? Why is Mando doing this? Why is he on the outs with the guild? Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, what's going on here? Yeah.
All right, let's shift gears here to Obi-Wan Kenobi. This was probably the premier series of Star Wars this year that everyone was most excited about, anticipating. Ewan McGregor returning to the franchise after doing the prequels, and basically filling in the gaps a little bit of what happened between the end of the prequels and the original Star Wars films, A New Hope.
And of course, we had to start on Tatooine again.
Of course, yes, because that's where Obi-Wan was, obviously. At least that part, I'm like, all right, fine. We know he was there when the original series opened.
It's legit.
He had a reason to be there.
Yeah.
But I also remember thinking too, before the series happened, I was like, look, this whole show can't take place on Tatooine, because why would especially if Vader's going to be in, because we know
what
that
if he go back?
no one knew that Luke was there. So
Right.
why would there? So he has to be off planet at some point. So that was my thing. Is like, all right, I know he's going to be here, but I know he's also going to have to leave
Got it.
for some point here
All right,
too.
fair enough.
So this was set 10 years after the end of the original prequels. Obi-Wan's kind of a broken man. He's been hiding out. He's not using the Force. He's trying to stay as low as possible. I love that he's working on his job is apparently cutting up the meat of some kind of sand whale thing or something.
Oh, right.
Remember, they're just like
slicing
he's just
stuff.
out
And he's
slicing up
like
meat
producer.
and-
Producer. Yeah.
When he gets kind of pulled back in because the Inquisitors, who come from the Rebels cartoon, show up on the planet, and the Inquisitors, for anybody who doesn't know and hasn't followed the animated cartoons, are basically kind of some fallen Jedi that was corrupted by Vader and the Emperor to essentially go out and hunt other Jedi. I would take it back. Not even Jedi. They aren't actually people that were full-fledged Jedi necessarily, but were people that were Force sensitive. And in the case of the one that we follow in the show was actually one of the Jedi younglings.
Yes, right. There was that flashback.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So they were taken and corrupted by the dark side so that they could go out and hunt any remaining Jedi.
And what was her
that were
name
out
again? What was
anyway?
Riva.
Oh damn! Why can I not think?
Not
of
Riva?
Riva. Yes.
Yeah.
Riva.
Yes. Because she had a real struggle, and I like that part of
exactly.
Obi-Wan. But
So
anyway.
the Inquisitors show up and basically are hunting for a Jedi on the planet because there was another one there. Kind of get a sense that she knows that Kenobi's out there somewhere, And essentially they set up a plot in order to get Kenobi, which is kidnapping Princess Leia, which I thought was a nice twist because it was the one thing they did not reveal about the show ahead of time. I had no idea
that was coming.
That Leia was going to I kind of assumed. Well, we'd even seen in the trailer was young Luke. We already knew young Luke was going to be in the show,
right?
But I think the smartest thing this show did was saying like, this story isn't about Luke. We don't really care about him. Instead, we're going to bring in a very young, precocious Princess Leia. She gets kidnapped.
Who was cast perfectly.
Oh, yeah.
So cute.
She was awesome.
Absolutely.
But go ahead. Yeah.
Obi-Wan has to go off planet to find her and to rescue her at the behest of Bail Organa, her adopted father, who asks him to help out. There's this whole quest to go find him, and along the way, Darth Vader reappears and joins the hunt for Kenobi.
You again.
And there are two amazing face-offs between the two of them in the series before we wrap up. And eventually get Obi-Wan back to Tatooine, where he, presumably stays. I don't know. This is the kind of story where I'm sure you could find a good reason to tell more stories where he is some rogue agent that has to go off and do random stuff. But let's assuming there's not going to be any more Obi-Wan Kenobi, we get him back to where we know he's at the beginning of
that's right.
New Hope. So
yeah.
Let's riff on this for a moment. Let's talk a little bit. Mark, I'll actually let you start this time. What was your thoughts on Obi-Wan Kenobi? I know you're I like the Jedi and lightsabers guy, so I feel like this show is definitely in your wheelhouse.
If you didn't, serve that itch, then...
This was the greatest thing ever.
Okay, there we go.
I mean, that second fight between Vader and Kenobi was everything you ever wanted to see.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. So.
Yeah, I will agree.
Awesome.
Because, I remember thinking, when you watch the original trilogy, and they didn't have the budget and the effects and the ability to do the stunt work the way you wanted. The lights, going wrong, the lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader and Empire, I still think is probably my favorite lightsaber battle but a lot of it has to do with a lot of it has to do with the emotion of it too. The fact that these two are coming together and the big revelation and all, there's a lot of emotionality to it. And then the prequels, I feel like, kind of went a little overboard with lightsaber fights with everybody spinning around.
It was
a little too much. I love what we're getting
Sam
now.
could have had a lightsaber back in there, right?
But these fights with him and Vader were
they were raw.
They were raw.
They were much more.
And it was two people very powerful in the Force tapping into their abilities and battling it out. And man, I love that we're getting more Vader. And just like in Rogue One, where you have that, that glimpse of Vader there, I like my Vader in small dose. Because a lot of people after the show were like, all right, let's do a Vader series now. I'm like, no, I don't want that.
No.
I don't get me wrong. I think you could do a lot of great stuff. And there's been some great Vader comic books that have fleshed him out over the years. But as a series and as movies, I want as little of Vader as possible. I'd be fine if we don't see him again for another 5 or 6 years in any of these projects. Because I think you could overdo it with Vader and see way too much of him and make him less of a powerful presence when he's on screen. And this really worked for me. But
I do appreciate how much that I feel Obi-Wan Kenobi did show, oh no, Vader is big, bad, scary.
Yeah.
Rebels kind of showed that more than anything, I feel. Yeah. Just his, jumping, leaping fights. Even games that we've played, the Fallen Order series.
Yeah.
That just how he's of course he's the big bad, but in the original and in the prequels,
there's only so much you can do with a dude in a bulky suit.
Exactly, yeah. And he's this geriatric guy who has breathing issues, So can he really come that fast and come at me like that? But the first fight where he just sets Obi-Wan
overwhelmed
on fire, and he's just whatever, I'm not Anakin anymore, I am this entity, and don't even worry. I just true fan service to my Vader loving self of just making him the big bad. He truly was intimidating, and I feel maybe could it have been in the older movies where he just walked really slow, he wasn't super fast or anything, and I just thought, okay, yeah, he's the boss, but he's not very scary to me. I don't know. Maybe it could have just been we didn't have access to.
It's just more of a presence than
the camera and the effects and the things
right.
we do now. But yeah, I thought it was incredible.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the very beginning of this series and talk about how Obi was broken.
Right.
You said so. Give me the lead up there. It was more than just his battle with Anakin and stuff like that.
I think between having to essentially what he thought kill his his Padawan, kill his
apprentice,
his friend and his apprentice.
Yeah.
Because I think up until he does find out Vader's still alive in this series, which you find out at the end of like episode 2 or 3, I think, of this, when he finds out that Vader's still alive.
But when we rejoin him, doesn't remember.
Right, he doesn't know. He doesn't know.
Yeah.
He thinks Anakin's dead. He left him for dead, and for good reason. Like cut off his arms and legs and left him laying by a lava pit. He kind of assumed, that guy's done. But I mean, I think between that and the fall of the Jedi Order and the rise of the Empire and the fact that there was so few Jedi even left anymore, I think he just hit a point where it's like, look, I'm gonna live out my life in seclusion. I don't, he'd cut himself off from the Force, which was something we'd established in The Last Jedi, that Luke had done that in his old age. It's kind of a little bit of a reflection of that.
Yep.
Where he just got
it's
so
just
jaded.
too much,
he
right?
did like, I don't want to be part of this anymore. I don't want to do this. And if you remember that young Jedi that showed up on the planet, on Tatooine, and asked him for help, and he kind of turned away and just said, like, run, just go, go hide somewhere, like, There's nothing to do here. There's no battle to be fought anymore, and I like that. I like that idea of someone who was such a pivotal person in the Force and so powerful and so
Well, it brings a human element to
to
that whole aspect of it. I mean, you think about Jedi, like you think they should mentally be able to handle these types of things, right? But there's a very human aspect of it, so it'll be interesting to see where they go with Ahsoka too. On those kinds of realms, the humanistic element of it. Right. So
I mean, and we'll talk about this a little more in a moment here too, I think, when we talk more about the prequels. But a big part of, I think, what was interesting in the prequels is, and it's what I think they didn't do very well in the movies that they've done very well in the stuff they've done in the prequel era since.
All right.
Which is kind of elaborate on the idea that the Jedi were extremely hubristic and not actually very good at what they were doing. They had kind of been settled in for so long as like peacekeepers of the galaxy.
Right.
But they'd also set up all these dumb rules about, like, you're not allowed to be in love, and you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that, and we don't actually intervene with a lot of stuff. We kind of just maintain order or stuff or whatever. And that was the reason why they fell. Like, the whole reason why it was so easy for Palpatine to rise to power within their midst, right under their nose.
Corruption was happening in their own organization that they were trying to protect and keep the peace force. So it just completely,
Exactly. And I like that we're starting to get into more of that, of the understanding of, like, look, these are very powerful people who felt. You always talk about that concept of power corrupts, absolutely, And so I think the idea that the Jedi were their own worst enemy and caused all of their own problems. It's easy to point to the dark side folks and the Sith and say, like, well, these bad guys showed up and took it all. Like, you're talking about literally one dude, essentially, that broke down an entire Jedi Order, corrupted an entire galaxy, and caused everything to fall and an empire to rise, just because he exploited their own weaknesses, their own internal weaknesses. So I think you're starting to see that with a lot of the characters. And Ahsoka, actually, depending on what they do with her backstory.
Yes.
I mean, I know, obviously, if you watch the Clone Wars series, you get a lot more of that. You understand how she felt the need to disconnect from the Jedi Order because she recognized what we're doing here is not really
working.
the right, not working.
Yeah.
It's not, it's, she knew, she could see the writing on the wall and got out, before that happened. But I think that's gonna be a fascinating thing to watch. And Obi-Wan was clearly an example of that. Of like, look, these are just people. At the end of the day, these are characters who are still emotional and flawed. They're not perfect, even though they can wield the Force and have lightsabers and look like the paragons are good. But guess what? They can screw up just as much as anybody else. And it also, I think one of the things that really, because you watch this series and especially you see his relationship with Leia, and then at the end when he finally goes and meets Luke, and it made me immediately think about the original film, A New Hope, and his interactions with Luke in that movie. And I will say, like, because there's a lot of people that wanted to find stuff that didn't continuity match up with A New Hope. Well, and I don't feel like they did, because I think they were very conscious of the fact that the way that Obi-Wan treats Luke and the decision not to tell him about his father was very well informed by what he experienced here. And his recognition that when he, the whole line of, like, when he tells Luke, your father was, corrupted and killed by a man named Darth Vader, right? A dark Jedi named Darth Vader.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, oh, he lied to him and didn't tell him the truth. He kind of did tell him the truth.
Yeah.
Because that final encounter where he recognizes and Anakin tells him, Anakin's gone.
Anakin's gone.
Darth
He said
Vader
that.
now.
Yeah.
He tells him that.
He said that.
And I think Obi-Wan took that to heart and understood, like, you're right. Like, the person
My Anakin's gone.
This was my closure. The person that I loved and trained, like, he's not there anymore. It's this thing now. And I think that informed the way he acted. And like, if you think about, like, the final moments when he battles Vader on the Death Star, in A New Hope, and he looks over and sees Luke, and that's his moment where he realizes, like, I have done well. The new generation is here.
Yep.
I
can tap out.
He will lead us in the future. It's time for me to be done.
Yeah.
I think with this series kind of fills in and creates such an amazing arc for that character. That, yeah, it's a very good show, very well done. I think if you are a fan of Star Wars as a whole and have loved that character, and especially if you're someone who liked the prequels also, this was a perfect bridge type series to get you there. This was everything I think we wanted it to be.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts on
Very
everyone?
impressive. No.
Just all these Star Wars guys becoming babysitters. I mean, truly, like, we had
What?
Mando was like
Oh,
the OG
right.
baby,
Boy.
babysitter, and then
Yeah.
now Obi-Wan's chasing after
Babysitting.
Leia and babysitting.
Yeah.
That's just like a thing. I mean, totally different. Stranger Things, Steve is a babysitter. He
Yeah.
babysits those kids.
That's
and
true.
So
Yeah.
it's just like a common thing.
Give me the Leia series, by the way.
Oh my
I
God.
want.
Is
I
it
want
on the
more.
books?
Well, no. There's nothing been announced yet, but I want to.
Maybe
see
that's
more
the
of this
movie.
girl. I don't know. I want to see more of this girl. Like, she needs to pop
Yeah.
up. Like, maybe even I'd be fine if, like, you let her age a few years and give us like the young
I thought
Leia
she did a
who's-
fantastic
who's
job.
like
Yeah.
digging into the the beginnings of the rebellion. Honestly, I guess there's a path to potentially having. Maybe not her, that actress, but having young Leia in Andor season 2 potentially.
Yeah.
So, given what we kind of understand about that timeline and
Yep.
that they're dealing with the beginnings of the rebellion there.
Yep.
But yeah, fantastic actress.
Yeah.
Definitely want to see more of her.
Yeah.
All right, let's quickly talk about Tales of the Jedi, because this is kind of short and sweet. These were 6 little short 10-15-minute episodes in the animation style of the Clone Wars. And basically, it's 6 episodes that tell essentially kind of backstories for Ahsoka, and also for Count Dooku. And really it's more for Dooku, I think, more than anything almost, because you get kind of his whole, his arc of like why he fell. And again, going back to the idea of what the Jedi were doing wrong, you kind of watch him and go like, all right, well, you chose the wrong people to ally yourself with,
Right.
but you weren't wrong.
Was he wrong?
No.
Yeah. Like the Jedi were standing by and watching corruption happen in the Senate and didn't really do enough about it, or didn't get involved where they should. I found him very relatable.
Yes.
It's just
So that was surprising to you.
yeah, and
Yeah,
he
yeah,
just
yeah.
I mean, I guess like because in the prequels, Dooku's just like this old bad guy who shows up and fights with Yoda and he's gone and he's done. And he gets murdered by Anakin and he's done.
Like what was his story?
Yeah, exactly. And then the Ahsoka stories in here really don't give you a lot about Ahsoka's whole story, because they basically just show her as a little baby first, and that she clearly was born with force powers and I did like how
What do you think about the last one then? Was that compelling enough to you, knowing what you know about the character, for her to get back into the fight?
Yes,
you do,
because again, this is where being a fan of the Clone Wars cartoon and the Rebels cartoons helps, because you see a lot of Ahsoka's journey in Clone Wars, and where she leaves off, where basically she quits the Jedi Order,
she's gone
and goes off to do her own
She's
thing.
farming, and
then when she appears in Rebels, she's one of the founding members of the rebellion in a sense, except working in the shadows in the background. And there's also there's an amazing book called Ahsoka that I've read that kind of fills in a lot of that gaps too and leads you to that point. And basically a lot of what you see in that last episode of the Tales of the Jedi was clearly borrowed from that book. A very condensed version of that story, where an Inquisitor shows up and is after her, and it compels her to join the fight and to help out with the rebellion as it's being founded. So I appreciated it for that. I could see why, again, if you're not someone who's been immersed in the story of Ahsoka and watched all this other stuff, you
well,
might
to
be
me
like,
it seemed
okay.
a little thin, and I haven't been watching. I'm like, okay, is that enough for her to get back into the fight and be like, okay? So let me ask this sidebar question: where does that episode, right, where she decides to fit into the timeline of Boba Fett when we saw her with Luke?
Oh, that's the Tales of the
she's
Jedi
a
story. That is
way before that.
Pre A New Hope.
Okay,
that's the founding of the rebellion. We're talking probably a few years before A New Hope.
Okay,
and then whereas her appearances in Mando and Book of Boba Fett are 30 years after Return of the Jedi?
Later.
No, I'm sorry, 5 years.
Yeah,
30 years is the new trilogy.
Yes.
Mando is set 5 years after Return of the Jedi.
Enough. Got it.
So
we're
Rebels talking
to get past, because she had a huge.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was before.
That was 2 years before A New Hope, I think.
Yeah.
So we're talking a gap of maybe
15?
10 years, 10 to 15. No,
Yeah.
you're right, about 15
years.
probably.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry to sidebar.
No,
but anyway,
it's okay.
I get it. It's hard to keep track.
The
of
timeline just continues to change. I feel like in ways that like I'm like before this happened and after.
Right.
It's like the.
I feel like. Did you ever read any of the expanded universe books back in the day?
No, but there's so many now. Like
there are.
now.
There's a lot of new stuff out there. But like back in the day when like Del Rey and Random House were publishing the expanded universe Star Wars, back when we thought there was never going to be new Star Wars before the prequels came out. So there was tons of books that were written that take place after Return of the Jedi. Like they built out an entire massive decades-long storyline of what happened to Luke and Leia and Han, Thrawn, all this stuff, or whatever. The new Jedi Order, basically, like all this stuff that got built out for, age the characters. Luke and Han had kids. They had 3 children. One of them ended up being corrupted to the dark side at one point. Like this huge, massive stories.
Wow.
For years. In those books, though, whenever you would open one of those books up, at the front there would be a timeline that would show you like, and it would all pivot around the original trilogy and basically tell you like, all right, here's how many years this was before the Battle of Yavin. So like, how we have like BC and AD now, whatever. They would have BBY before Battle of Yavin or ABY after Battle of Yavin. So that you could like, that would help you determine where stuff was. And there would literally be like 3 pages at the beginning of every book that would show you all the books that have been released and where they fit into the timeline.
Got it.
I feel like we kind of need that.
We
for
need
the shows
that.
now.
Yeah, we totally need that.
I feel like we kind of need something at the beginning. It shows like, here's the movies you know of, and then here's where this story is taking place in those movies. So there's a little tip for you, Disney executives, Disney Lucasfilm executives, because I'm sure you're listening right now. So, but Marco, anyway, did you have any thoughts on Tales of the Jedi series?
Yeah.
No, he's got nothing there.
Yeah. Did you get anything else out of it? I mean, but you were okay?
No, I mean, they were fine for what they were. Like I binged them all in like, 1 hour practically.
Right.
And I was like, oh, these were fun. Like I think like it was kind of, and
How do you like the style?
I'm sure they'll do more of this.
Well, do you like the style
of
the really thin, not thin, short story? Like just the short pop? Because they're like 12 minutes, right?
Reminds me of
they're
Visions.
like 12, 15 minutes. Okay.
I could see this being something you do a lot more of, just have like random little stories about Jedi that we don't know as much about, or people that get introduced and give it filling us in. And I'm sure a lot of the thought behind this was like, hey, there's an Ahsoka series coming, and maybe people want to get
develop that a little bit more.
Especially I guess for the folks that don't want to watch all of the Clone Wars and Rebels to catch up. At least watch those 3 and you kind of get like, okay, so she was born Force sensitive. She trained with Anakin. Anakin was her master, because that's going to be, I think, pivotal to the new series. And, learned about how to fight and not give up. So there was a podcast I was listening to that pointed out that episode where she's just getting, like, fighting the clone troopers over and over again and constantly getting knocked out. It was kind of demonstrating how Anakin, in his the fact that Anakin had these kind of visions of the future, and that's part of what led him down the dark path, is seeing what was going to potentially happen, that maybe he was having that kind of visions even back then. And he wanted Ahsoka, because he loved Ahsoka so much and worked and trained her so hard and cared so much about what happened to her, that he was training her extra hard because he wanted her to be able to survive. Which, and to be fair, it worked, because that whole point of that last episode is, and when you also see when Order 66 happens, and most of the clone troopers, except for like one that she's able to kind of salvage, turns against her, like she's able to survive in part because of that training to some extent. Like she's able to survive what came that most of the other Jedi couldn't, because they weren't expecting it and they weren't trained to fight that many people at once. So I thought that was an interesting little tie in there.
Right.
So
I liked the Dooku representation. I totally thought that, and this was like not even possible, but when we were watching it, I was like, that sounds like Alan Rickman. I know it's not, because he's dead. But it's just this guy Corey Burton who voices basically virtually every person, every animated series ever.
Did you see they actually had Liam Neeson playing young Qui-Gon though?
Yes, literally insane.
I mean, can you imagine that? You're Liam Neeson, you get caught up like, hey, we need you to voice
this small,
younger version of your character from Star Wars that you haven't done in 30 years, 20 years now. Like, we need you to come voice this for like, that can't have taken more than 10 minutes in the studio.
Right.
I mean, he barely has any lines in that episode. So.
We saw that. We are like, Chris and I are like we're watching something and we're like, that person sounds familiar. Who is that? Run to IMDb and we're like, oh my God, it's so-and-so. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Like,
that's my favorite thing whenever I watch the, actually any of the Star Wars shows, because you get a lot of cameos of characters that are in makeup and stuff too. I love to just check out the credits and find out like, who did that voice? Who was that person? Because there's always little hidden people.
Easter eggs. Always Easter eggs.
Yeah. There's always little hidden random people that show up and stuff. And I guess, again, if I were anybody in Hollywood and Disney calls me up and says, "Hey, you want to appear in a Star Wars thing?" Like, yes, please.
Yes.
I'll be a stormtrooper. Thank you.
Yeah, right. Whatever it takes.
Anything you want,
Yeah.
you can have me shot in the first frame. That's fine. I'll be happy to
I'll die
be there.
first.
So, yeah.
You'd happily take that.
All right. Okay. So before we talk about Andor, because I think that's going to be a big part of our conversation here, let's talk about the prequels. So we've had we've had Obi-Wan and the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, this Tales of the Jedi. We've talked a lot about all these animated series and stuff are out there. Are we retconning the prequels? Are the prequels cool again? I know, Sam, you have a little more affinity to the prequels probably than Dean and I do. Like, but let's be honest.
Or Marco. Where are you on the prequels, Mark? Oh, he loves them.
Marco likes. All right, but I mean, I'd say the most, typically speaking, Star Wars fans who grew up with the original trilogy,
right,
had a much lesser opinion of the prequels.
Yes.
Whereas, again, like I mentioned,
if that was released when you were growing up, it's like, oh my gosh.
We were talking off mic earlier that, like, I think a lot of which Star Wars trilogy you love has to do with when it came out and what age you were. If you were young when the prequels came out, you probably have a much stronger affinity for the prequels. Same as if you were young, younger folks that have grown up and been very young around the age of the newer movies probably have much stronger affinity for those movies than the rest of us that have, again, been around since literally the originals came out. So, I mean, I'm just curious, like, what do you guys think about this? Do you want more prequel content? Do you feel like we're kind of almost retconning, making the prequels interesting again?
I mean, I think with Clone Wars and I think with Tales of Jedi, like, a lot of that still feels in a way prequel because it's like before everything happened in a way. Like, it's just providing context where it needs to be needed. But if anything, like, it's funny to me because I love the prequels, but if you like fall down the rabbit hole of like Twitter most days, it just feels like Jar Jar Binks and all that stuff just gets meme-ified. It's like a meme. It's funny.
As it should.
As it should, yes. But it's like, it's just
Jar Jar was a colossal mistake.
How
Let's
horribly
be honest.
awful the CGI has just become like a joke. It's just like, it's something for us people to laugh about because it's like, we grew up on movies like this because, like, we were. When I watched that, I was like, this is good. This is what, like, I had no comparisons, but I'm like, I grew up watching things like Spy Kids, and I'm like, I recently rewatched that, and I was like, this is awful. This is
not much holds up from your youth.
Right, but definitely in a way that, like, that's just kind of what I was used to, and I was like, this is everything for me. I love it.
Yeah, and I think maybe that's always why, like, I think the prequels will always feel lesser to me than the original trilogy because I can still watch the original trilogy, and granted, the special edition crap that's been thrown in, throws me off on some of it. But if you watch, if you let me watch the original trilogy in their original form, I still think those movies hold up today.
Yes, I agree.
I think the practical special effects really make those movies hold up. Versus if to your point, like, you watch the prequels now, especially on these high-tech 4K TVs we've all got. I watch it and go, oh my God,
that's just really bad.
This just looks horrendous. Yeah. It reminds me of when I first got my new TV. It had like the motion scrubbing thing on, and I didn't turn it off at first. Folks, if you've got motion scrubbing on your television, turn it off. Seriously, everyone hates it. It's awful. I remember watching it, the first Harry Potter film, or one of the first Harry Potter films, and seeing like a Quidditch scene,
or the car.
And that is the most awful looking special effects I've ever seen in my life when you're watching it in high def 4K with motion scrubbing.
Yeah, it
looks terrible. I was like, I've got to turn. That was the reason I turned that off. It's like, I can't stand to watch anything like this because it looks so awful. It's so clearly bad. And that's a lot of how I feel about the prequels, regardless of whether I've got motion scrubbing or anything. I watch a lot of that, and a lot of those special effects. I'm just like, man,
is it my TV that looks this bad, or is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm like, oh.
But I think I kind of think, like, when we're talking about some of these stories that have spun out of it, like, I think Dave Filoni clearly has an affinity for the prequels.
Yes.
And he's also become probably the most important person shepherding Lucasfilm content at this point. But I think he also what he did is he looked at the prequels and said, you know what, there's some amazing stuff happening in this story, in the background.
There are
amazing stories. Yeah. Which was Bad Batch this year? I forgot. I should have been on the list. I didn't figure you would probably watch that anyway. But the fact that, like, that we're telling these stories that are set during that era, and again, being able to go down that road of how badly the Jedi messed up and the reason why all this happened, I think that's stuff the movies should have explored and didn't really get into it, and instead focused way too much. I mean, I can't imagine. It baffles me to think of a kid sitting in a theater and be like, "Yeah, Trade Federation disputes, woo!"
Yeah, that's not going to happen. No, not going to happen.
And I'm not saying there wasn't good stories there, but that's the stuff that, like, you spread out over a TV series and can find some compelling stories to tell there. But again, in a movie where you just want to see the Jedi and their lightsabers and the battles and stuff, like, I think there was an opportunity. There was some good stories that exist in the prequel universe that Lucas and his crew did not know how to tell in those movies.
It just got broken down in Clone Wars. Like, I think that's how a lot of, like, because, I mean, I think even, like, I could still today watch the prequels and be like, oh my God, these are, like, not layman terms they're saying. Like, what does any of this mean? And I have to turn to my husband and I'm like, what does that mean? And then he's like, well, it's this. But with, like, the Clone Wars, I feel like since, yes, like, that was catered to whoever wanted to watch it, it felt like it was catered to kids because it came on Cartoon Network, I think.
Right.
So, like, you know, there was that, like, bit of description when it came to, like, okay, the reason why this is happening is because this kind of dispute, and that means the supply chain is whatever. And so it was like, oh, there you go. There's some 101 for me because I didn't know what that was when it was voiced in 10 different alien languages.
The Jedis are trapped behind alien lines. You know, the supply chain has been cut off. Anakin Skywalker has.
You do a good impression.
I love that stuff. I like because it's this old like Saturday matinee serial stuff, which was part of Lucas's inspiration for Star Wars anyway. And but I just feel like I feel like folks like Filoni and the folks that worked on these newer shows watched the prequels and probably had the same feeling about it. We're like, I love this because it's my Star Wars that I grew up with, probably. But there's so much more going on behind the scenes here that we're not getting.
We got to fill this in.
That's the stories we need to be telling.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing a good job of that, almost to the point where you're kind of like making the prequels seem cool again. But then
maybe
I'll
that's
go
the
watch a
reason for the
prequel.
Renaissance then.
Well, true, but I will go back and watch a prequel and go, oh no, this is still kind of awful. Like,
well, Darth Maul too. I think, like, honestly, with watching the Clone Wars and even I think in Solo there was like a mention of Darth Maul
at the very end.
But
he
like
took over one of the crime syndicates or something.
Yeah, Darth Maul really, you know, with that like the Seventh Sister and the like legion of Darth Maul-esque people. You know, I mean, I feel like that he was just like a big bad there, but they really didn't like dive into. And I think that's why I appreciate the concept of like Star Wars shows and shows in general, just because like there is that like prolonged 10 or so hours to just like dive into like someone's backstory, or they come from the planet of spiders, you know, it's just like there's like a
and you don't have to be beholden to appealing to a giant mass audience that otherwise doesn't care about Star Wars and won't consume
but it clearly did
the TV content.
I mean, it was on for forever, and you know they gave us that season 7, and so many people thought, you know, waited for that to happen. So clearly it was hitting its numbers and wasn't like a poorly syndicated thing or anything like that, but it hit the right audience. But word vomit. All
right, so the prequels are kind of cool again.
Yeah, okay.
I think the prequels.
I think the backstory to them is kind of cool.
The prequels have inspired good stuff, because I have to stop and say, all right, this show, this Obi-Wan show, the Clone Wars cartoon, the Rebels cartoon, those don't exist if you didn't make those prequels.
That's right.
So like I have to appreciate what those inspired, even if the original product is kind of mediocre. I appreciate what it inspired, at least. So that's my take.
So are they going to ever go back and do a redo on some of those?
I think that would be a good point.
I don't.
It's not going to be like Taylor Swift relaunching her music.
Well, it's like all the people that watched every single of the new Star Wars movies and said, I wanted the X cut. I want Abrams to go back and redo The Last Jedi. I want.
I don't think you could convince Hayden, or I think Hayden's done. Like the way he came back.
He's gonna be in Ahsoka.
Well, true, but I feel like it was a lot to pull, like, because even just like with things that things that came out before Obi-Wan, I feel like he just disappeared. He didn't act. He wasn't acting. He it was like
the Glass House and Jumper.
Yeah. It was 2012 and he just like stopped acting. So it was like he must have just, you know, he's got kids now, and
he went to Tatooine.
He's in seclusion on Tatooine.
He just needed to chill.
And he had to leave to go do an Obi-Wan Kenobi show. On Tatooine. Yeah. Well, he wasn't there, I guess. So.
Oh man.
All right. Let's get into Andor here then. So this has been the latest Star Wars series. First of all, I like it was a 12-episode series. It's been the longest thing they've done.
Yes.
And this is a very different kind of Star Wars show. For one, and I'm going to let Marco weigh in on this in a moment here. No Jedi. No lightsabers. No mention of the Force. I don't think anyone even mentions the Force at all. I don't think anyone even says, "May the Force be with you" at any point. But essentially, and I'm not going to give away too much here because Sam hasn't finished the series. Andor tells the story. So Cassian Andor, if you watched Rogue One, which has become one of my absolute favorite Star Wars movies, again because it is a different type of story. It's a war story.
The quality
is off the charts.
Exactly. It's just it's exceptionally well. A lot of the same folks, Tony Gilroy, a lot of the same people that worked on that movie, came over and did this show. So Cassian Andor was introduced in Rogue One as kind of like a rogue working within the early stages of the rebellion, someone who wasn't afraid to go out and kill someone if he had to in order to forward the rebellion's motivations.
He was tapped into the rebellion even early on this. I thought he was that rogue character.
No, I'm talking about in Rogue One, the movie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah, given that little backstory. This is his backstory. Sort of. I think it's funny because the show is called Andor and it's definitely about him, but there is so much more to this show's about that is beyond anything having to do with him. So essentially, we're following him in his early days, and we kick off with him basically searching for his sister, which I kind of forgot about that. That's where the show started. He's looking for his sister, runs afoul of a couple of Imperial goons, low-level Imperial officers or whatever on some planet, has to end up killing them, goes on the run. The Empire's searching for him.
But that sparks a whole character arc now.
Well, because also you get into this whole big storyline of what's happening in the Empire. And essentially this show becomes, there's kind of three major storylines.
But I like that part of it. Go ahead.
Right. There's essentially what happens with Andor, what's going on with him, on the run, trying to sort out, what he does or doesn't want to be involved in, because he gets involved in stuff that he doesn't really want to be part of, but he also needs to either for the sake of money or to get out from underneath the potential grasp of the Empire and stay under the radar. And there's also a story going on about the early days of the rebellion, and you get Mon Mothma in the Senate trying to fund the rebellion, essentially. You get a new character called Luthen, who is kind of working behind the scenes and is kind of, bridging the gap between the folks on Coruscant that are, trying to fund and work with the rebellion, and also sparking the original rebellion and, driving some of the early missions and heists and whatnot that needs to be done in order to
great character
to fund them in order to just start, destabilizing the Empire. And then you also have, Andor's story, or I'm sorry, then you also have the story of kind of what's going on in the Empire itself, which I think to me, the Empire stuff is some of the most fascinating part of it, because you get to see just the awful bureaucracy that a fascist state falls into, where you've got all these people that are clawing and vying for
power,
positions and power. Like the character of I cannot remember the guy's name, the guy that kind of like the low-level bureaucrat guy who wants to take on the Andor case because the other guy tells him it's not worth mentioning.
Right.
Gets himself involved, trying to find him and track him down. He's such a pitiful character.
Just a punchable face.
He's a fantastic character at the same time, because he so represents
he comes back at the end. Sorry, spoiler alert.
So it's okay.
He so represents what someone just swept up in this bureaucracy who wants the power and wants to get closer to the middle and wants to wear the white suit and go beat up on people and be kind of a jackboot thug or whatever.
Yeah. No, he doesn't do the dirty work. He tells people to do the dirty work, kind of a thing. Yeah.
And then you've got all these characters. You get this character Deidre, who is like again, an up-and-coming Imperial agent who clearly has kind of been, I don't know if it's like a sexist thing, but like she's clearly getting pushed aside when she's trying to, come up with maneuvers and trying to find ways to, flush out this potential rebellion. And then you're also seeing, again, the slow machinations of the Empire and like kind of the banality of evil, the stuff they do. Again, not to. Oh man, I don't think I can give this.
It's okay. Spoiler. It's totally okay. Don't even worry.
All I'll say is there's a moment when you learn about something the Empire did on a planet. I don't know if you remember this, that gets used as torture for a character.
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay, so there's a character that gets tortured using the sounds of a dying race of people that the Empire wiped out and recorded their sounds in order to torture people with it. It is one of the most harrowing and awful things I've ever seen, and but it works so well, and it's such a clear indicator of like how awful the Empire is. And yet you've also got but I think also what's interesting though is you're also telling this story that's clearly about a bunch of people who are living under the Empire that don't really have any skin in the game. And again, this is where like I like the fact like
you mean the low level people?
Yeah, where just somebody living on a planet, and you get to see this like on Andor's home planet, where you've got people that are kind of wanting to rebel, but you've also got a lot of people that are just like, look, I just want to live my life.
That's exactly
I don't want to draw the attention. We don't need the Empire showing up here. I don't want stormtroopers around.
Even the people he killed were there.
Exactly.
They were like,
let's just live our lives and go about our business. And I think there's a fascinating story there about how you like we always in the Star Wars movies we want to condense this idea around like good, evil, good guys that fight the good fight to take down the bad guys. But in the meanwhile, in the middle,
there's a lot of gray.
You've had a good 10+ years of this galactic empire, this fascist state that has developed, that is just going about its business. There are a lot of people that probably live very comfortably within that. And even though they don't like it, they're just like, I'm just living my life.
That's right.
And there's a lot of analogy, obviously, to fascist states in our own world right now. Like
just survive. Just
exactly.
Survive.
Just people that are just like, look, I don't like the fact that I live in this state where there's this horrible dictator who's doing all this bad stuff, and I could get murdered at any minute for saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. But I'm just trying to live. I'm trying to live. I'm trying to survive. I'm trying to feed my family. Trying to take care of things. No, I don't want to help you try to take down the big guys because I'll probably end up dead, and everybody I love will too.
Sure, I want to, like in my heart. But
Right,
am I going to take any action on it? Because no, I'll be dead in like 2 seconds.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So I feel like they do a great job telling that story. So I've been rambling here. I'll let you guys.
No. I like all that. I like what
in.
you're tapping into because I think the Empire angle of it has been very refreshing in this whole series to kind of see some of the underbelly starting to develop there a little bit and see where. To me, it was always, I don't know. I always just thought this Empire was this thing that already existed and it was a well-oiled machine and but there's some cracks in the armor and there's there's a very even humanistic element that's been brought
think
to
about
it.
like dictators and fascists that try to like run a country and how much trouble they have with that. We're talking about running a freaking galaxy. Thousands of planets you're trying to keep under your heel. They don't even have the Death Star yet. They're just like just running around in some spaceships and a bunch of people with guns.
But isn't it a little serendipitous that they're drilling into that one occasion where he killed the 2 people? I mean, it's like they're really drilling into. To me, I sometimes take a step back and it's like, do we? I mean, because there's a lot going into that, right? I mean, they're pouring into this one, and so I don't know if that's a little bit of a disconnect for me that I know they got to tell the story and they got to amp it up a little bit and indicate why it's so important. But anyway, yes, I love where they're going with that and his story alone. I like the character arc, although I'm feeling like I need even more on before this now.
Right,
how did he get to be such a he's a killer? I mean, he's he can do right? I mean, how did he? Or is that in one of these that I haven't watched yet?
Where the I feel like the planet he's from,
Cassian.
Yes,
Yeah.
That we know very little about.
It's a very interesting nativist
like a
story there.
Lord of the Flies-esque.
Yeah, it was like a native
culture. No parents.
Yeah, they were kind of telling a story almost of like how native cultures can get swept up by colonists, essentially, colonizers, and how like basically their entire culture essentially seems like it's been wiped out. Like he and I guess if his sister's out there because he's looking for a sister, are potentially the last of their race that even exists in the galaxy.
They're just like scavengers, and they
and basically the Empire just showed up there because they wanted to mine the planet. They wanted to mine its resources, and they essentially wipe out his people, and a whole culture just gets completely and utterly lost just because they want to do some mining. And that's something that.
So maybe I don't need to overthink it. He's a scrappy guy. That's what he is.
Yeah, exactly. He's been someone who's just had to learn how to get by. And I mean, and if you think about it also, and again, very analogous to stuff that's happened in our actual world, is he is essentially a native kid who got kidnapped by kind of like the white savior type thing. We've seen that happen in our own culture and society, where he basically got kidnapped, brought into a whole new world and a new society, and raised with this woman, that kind of became his mother. And yet was removed from the world he lived in. But at the same time, if he hadn't, he would have died there. Like he wasn't going to survive. So like I think there's an interesting kind of like, should we have left him there, even though he probably would have died with his people, or is this for the best for him? But also he's totally lost his culture essentially and no longer connected to it. I don't even know if he even knows the language anymore at this point. So this is a show with so many layers happening at all times. And then And again, I don't know if you're far enough along to have seen this yet. You get into incarceration too.
Yes, right.
And a really interesting kind of
a couple
analogy and
there.
metaphor about our incarceral system.
That's right.
And like kind of the new version of slavery that we've kind of built into a lot of prison systems these days, where you've got indentured servitude of people that are serving out sentences essentially so they can work for private corporations and do a bunch of stuff for them. And that's exactly what sort of is happening there. I'm not going to give you much of that away because that is probably some of the best episodes I think of the series are what takes place around the whole prison storyline that goes on there for a while. So there's so much going on in this show. And I will say, and a lot of people have said this too, like when I first watched those first 3 episodes, which they were wise to release the first 3 at once because stuff doesn't really start happening until the end of the third one. It's a slow burn to start. Plus, I think you have kind of mini arcs. It seems like there basically is 4 arcs of 3 episodes each that kind of tell you different parts of the story. And it's a slow start, but once I got into it and once I understood what they were doing, and once I also realized that this was a 12-episode series, because I think when I got to around episode 5 or so, I was like, where is this show going? We probably only have a couple episodes left, right? And then I found out like, oh, no, this is 12 episodes. Like, okay, we got a little more time to let this breathe and grow. And I think that's when I fell in love with it. So
yeah.
Marco, what about you, man? I know you binged most of it yesterday, actually, and I know you've mentioned before you're a lightsabers and Force and Jedi kind of guy.
I am. I agree. I didn't like the show until maybe the prison stuff started happening. I thought what I'll call the second half of it was much better than the first. I mean, that's kind of my thought. I needed some. I really wanted some mention of Jedi or lightsabers or the Force or something in it, but I also understand why they didn't do it.
Because as far as everyone knows, the Jedi are gone.
Yeah, and it wasn't casual talk.
Right.
You know, they're so far removed from the Jedi Council and all that stuff.
You know, and that reminded me of another thing, too, because I was thinking about this the other day, too, that the idea of, not having Jedi and Force and lightsaber and people not talking about this stuff. The vast bulk of the people that live in this galaxy have never met a Jedi. Never picked up a lightsaber. May not even know what the Force even is.
Absolutely.
It's fantastical stuff maybe they've heard about and probably
maybe the Force is like a ubiquitous thing that everybody kind of understands, but never seen it.
But how many of those people think Jedis are just like zealots? They're just like
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a religion. It's like some kind of religious zealotry or something. And again, we're talking 10 years. I guess we're like maybe like 5 to 6 years of this series from the end of the prequels and the fall of the Jedi. I'm sure the Empire's propaganda machine has also been out there.
Oh, totally.
Basically, just again drumming them up as like these were these awful zealots who were
terrorists.
Terrorists keeping the society down or whatever. Because I just think in general, most people are like, I don't know or care about Jedi because it has nothing to do with me and my life, and and it's fairy tales at that point. It almost might be a fairy tale to a lot of us, even though we're not that far removed. But again, if you think about a fascist state and how quickly they clamp down on information and what they feed to people and what they tell people is happening versus what's really happening. Right. By that point, I'm sure a lot of people either are, I don't want to talk about this or think about it, or I've been so brainwashed that I just think those were fairy tales that don't even exist. They were lunatics, that were out there stealing children, and which they did. Kidnapping children and training them to be religious zealots.
So let's take a sidebar and go down the one path that I needed you to help me understand, or maybe this is an area where the series can explore a little bit more. All right, so the guy who owns the artifact place, Luthen,
Stellan Skarsgård, excellent work.
Bootstrap Bill.
Is he's new to this?
Yes.
I mean, we haven't seen him in any of the other.
He has not been in any of the cartoons.
So his character needs to be explored because I feel like he's really instrumental in what's going on the rebellion. Right?
Yeah, but I tell you what, though,
or is he just a pawn?
Not to give much away here, that speech that he gives at the end of episode 6, 7, maybe.
Yeah.
That speech that he gives to that undercover agent, man, that gives you a lot of what you need to know about him.
That's fair.
Where you understand why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm sure there's more. And by the way,
he can say it, but I think there's still a good story there.
Yes.
Right?
So by the way, if you haven't heard, there is going to be a season 2 of Andor. That's going to be it.
Only really?
one more season, and that's it.
Okay.
I think we're got a couple years to wait, though. I think we're looking at 2024 before it comes out. Because it became very clear to me as we got to the end here. I'm like,
they better hurry.
There's a lot more story to tell here.
You mean between then and the end of Rogue One?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't or between the beginning of Rogue One, I guess. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'm assuming I'm assuming we're going to lead up to a little bit more of like where Cassian was in Rogue One when he's officially working for the rebellion, and it's kind of full fledged at that point.
Yeah, gotcha.
You see, obviously, you get some of the very, very beginnings of it happening in this show, but so we get one more season at least to fill this out a little more. But maybe there'll be more.
I thought
about
his
Luthen.
character. I think there's more room there, and maybe you're right. Maybe I need to go back and rewatch that.
I think
his speech part.
that speech he gives tells you a lot about him and his character. It's one of those things I'm like, if they don't bother to give us a background on him, I feel like I understand a lot of him just based on that speech.
How did he and Cassian come to be again? How did they bump into each other?
He was already working with Bix, the woman that was friends with Cassian. They kind of had sort of relationship with, sort of like.
Is that the connection?
So she's been working with the rebellion and basically like sending out messages to Luthen to move parts, basically to move like equipment, like stolen Imperial equipment,
supply chain
to provide the rebellion.
Yeah.
And basically, like he was her contact, but he'd never been there before. But he showed up because he'd heard of what was happening with Andor and recognized him as someone that could potentially be brought into their, to their movement.
Well, it was a good guess. It was a little bit of a gamble on his
It was.
side, but it was
very
a really good guess.
And that's because I love some of the scenes between Luthen and Mon Mothma when they're talking about what they're doing, and clearly she's uncomfortable with like what he's doing and the moves that he's making. While at the same time she's also trying to figure out how to siphon money and move it around in order to fund them. But she's also uncomfortable, and yet her own cousin is even involved in it. And you could she's fascinating too, because she's a character that at first I was watching him like, I'm a little bored with Mon Mothma's story here. And then as you get a little further in, you're like, oh, okay, I get like the weird position she's in and what she has to do.
There's a lot more to explore there. There's another one of those layers.
Exactly. And again, like it's one of those things, if you stop and think about it, like at some point, if you stop and think about it, like where did the rebellion get what they needed
This is
to do
good point.
what they do?
They got to be funded.
Yeah, where do they get their ships? Where do they get their money? Where do they get their troops? How do they bring people in? How do they stay hidden? Like you got to realize, like, someone's got to be working from the inside of this awful state and
keep it off the record so the Empire can't find out about it.
Exactly.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating.
So very good stuff here. I'm looking forward to more Andor. This is definitely a show that I'm excited to see what they manage to do in this next season of it. So But we got to wait a little while.
So in the last episode was really good.
Last episode was pretty good. Finish the series so we can talk about Sam.
I'm so sorry.
What about?
It's all right. I mean, because there's a lot of folks that maybe listen to this episode that haven't, finished the series either. It's still fairly recent.
What about that little teaser at the end, the last episode?
Oh yeah, the little
of what the parts were.
I had a feeling that was the case.
Did you?
Yeah.
I didn't really know what the parts were for, but I thought, oh, okay.
I had a feeling.
Oh wait, I missed this.
I'm not gonna. We'll talk. We'll talk about this maybe after Sam goes, because I don't want to. Because it talks about too much of the prison stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but there's
we know what they were making now?
Yes.
Oh, dang it.
Yes. It was a little mid-credit scene or end credit scene that they stuck in. Very, very brief.
Dang it. Okay.
Anyway. All right. So let's wrap up here talking quickly about what's next for Star Wars. So we know for sure that coming in 2023 is Mandalorian Season 3.
Okay. We're good with that.
Should be early in the season. We should be getting that. Ahsoka series should be out sometime probably in the summer.
Yeah. What are your expectations? Where does it start? Where do you think we're going to parachute in at?
I think we're gonna. I think the main story is going to be kicking off from where she left at the end of Book of Boba Fett, where she's heading off. Because we know her goal is to find Grand Admiral Thrawn, presumably because she's looking for Ezra Bridger, who is a character from the Rebels cartoon, a young Jedi that she helped mentor and train and worked with at the early stages of the rebellion. I guess we're going to probably get. We know Hayden Christensen's been cast in the show, so we're going to get some flashbacks to her as his apprentice, I assume, so we can understand that relationship. Because again, it's the kind of thing where like you can't throw this show out there assuming people have watched 7 seasons of Clone Wars and 4 seasons of Rebels.
Yeah.
Like you have to assume people have not watched any of that stuff.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to give some context and help you understand that she was Anakin's apprentice.
Yep, got it.
And what happened to her at the end of the Clone Wars, how she got away from Order 66. I imagine that'll be spread out.
We got to explore that a little bit.
Yeah, either that'll be spread out or that'll be maybe the first episode or two will give you a lot of that context.
Do you think there'll be a duel in between them? Because that happened in Rebels, but...
Yeah, you might see them sparring, but you're not going to...
Who?
Ahsoka
and Anakin. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of what that's...
In order for Marco to watch, we have to have something like that.
Oh, there'll be... Trust me, this one will be in his wheelhouse. There'll be plenty of Force stuff.
Plenty of Force,
Jedi.
plenty of...
And also, assuming we're going to get... hopefully a good dose of Grand Admiral Thrawn. outside of Ahsoka, probably my second favorite character in the Star Wars universe.
Fair enough.
I wonder who they'll cast.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
I'm surprised none of that's come out yet because we know who's playing Ahsoka. Sabine has been cast, so that's another character from Rebels. She's kind of a pseudo Mandalorian. I guess she's a Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Yeah. She actually was the heir to the Darksaber, right?
Yes.
But declined.
we saw her name Mando.
Yes,
No.
Yeah.
No, we saw not Sabine. That was what's her name?
That one girl.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
She's got a name.
Well, she thought she was getting the throne.
Right.
Okay.
So Sabine is another character who ran with the Rebels crew in the cartoon.
Got it.
She's been cast for this. Ezra Bridger has been cast, actually. Not someone I know whatsoever who he is. I'm assuming they're saving the Thrawn reveal for a while. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't even officially tell us that he's in the show until he appears
like
in
at
the
the
show.
end,
right.
or he's
Got to
and then
keep
maybe
that
a
hidden.
stem off.
Because for any people who've been fans of the expanded universe, and Thrawn does appear in the Rebels cartoon also, like that is a character. Like when Disney wiped the expanded universe and said no, all these books and stuff that you guys did over these
This is crap. We're not
years
doing
is
anything
gone.
right. Yeah.
I think the thing most people were pissed off about more than anything
Thrawn.
was Thrawn, and that's why he ended up getting inserted into
I see.
Rebels.
Yeah.
And now there's a whole new series of books about him and the current canon that fits in there. And man, I cannot wait for that. Ahsoka's gonna be my
Lars
jam.
Mikkelsen.
Have they cast it?
Yeah.
Are you serious? Is that for real? Is that stuff?
Oh
casting?
no, it's just in Rebels. I'm sorry. I just Googled.
Okay, all right. I mean,
Never mind. Sorry for
how do you do that? Because he was
Sorry for the fake
he was
spoiler.
Jin's father in Rogue One. I don't think you can.
that's
I mean,
right.
granted, he's blue, so I guess with the makeup he wouldn't maybe know as well. But
I think Jason Isaacs would be the guy who plays Lucius Malfoy. I
Yeah,
just the
yeah.
villains of the things that I've consumed in my life. I feel like
Jason
he makes
Isaacs would be good.
a really good Thrawn because he's
And
like
then he could have been part of Star Trek, Harry Potter, and Star Wars.
Wow.
that's a trifecta.
That's
That's
a
Probably he's
trifecta
probably
right
done
there.
something for Marvel or
probably.
other Disney properties too.
Yeah.
So is that all we're getting? Is Mando and Ahsoka?
I as far as I know, has been announced
Yeah,
at least.
okay.
Is there not another Bad Batch? Did Bad Batch
Yes,
come
I'm
out?
sorry. There is
and a
another
Bad
season
Batch?
of Bad Batch coming. That's coming next year also.
So I got to watch that.
There's been
It's
rumors.
very good. January
Is it good?
4th, 2023 is when
Okay.
the first episode will
So we're
come
not
out.
that far off from that. There's been rumors that we might get some more visions, but I don't know if that's going to happen next year.
I'd be interested to see where that goes. Just like different creators in the space and
Yeah,
having
right.
their own like rendition of things.
Yep. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we got some more Tales of the Jedi also. So, especially as you unveil more characters.
yep.
What are you guys expecting out of season 3 of Mando? Like, I feel like we're mostly going to get into him trying to reclaim Mandalore and
Right?
rebuild Mandalore.
Well,
know what else is
I don't
left
know,
for
but
him.
he's got some work to do because he's been shunned.
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, he
but
can't
yet he's
just
the
go
wielder.
and show up.
But the wielder of the Darksaber is also supposed to be the leader of Mandalore.
Well, I understand.
Yeah.
So you got a dichotomy there,
Right.
And I don't.
He doesn't want it, but he kind of is.
Are they
going
going to come out of the gate with that? He doesn't want it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. It'll be.
We're going to explore more Grogu, right? We got to go down that path.
There's like a teaser trailer that came out, and I honestly don't remember much of it because I didn't want to pay too much attention to it. But yeah, I assume.
What do we do with Grogu? I mean, where's that going to go?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, what?
We got to start setting that up.
I just don't know what else is left for him in that like babysitter space. You
Right.
know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
maybe he's assumed.
Well, and those
full-
timelines are not going to be work because Grogu's on a different life timeline, right? And he's going to be anyway. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
he's like Grogu's 50 years old already at this point.
Yeah. But I mean, Mando eventually is going.
Yeah, by the time Mando's dead, Grogu might be a teenager.
Exactly.
Technically.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So he's
Exactly.
not going to get like he's still
We're not
going to
see him
baby
grow up,
kind
yeah.
of thing. Yeah, exactly.
I am looking on an article I found that was posted November 6th. The things that are coming next year: Skeleton Crew. I haven't heard much about that.
Yeah,
It's
that's right. That's an animated project, isn't it?
It's animated,
Yeah.
yeah. And then Taika's undated, don't know when it's coming out, Star Wars movie. Kevin Feige's, I guess, directing a Star Wars movie. They
He
gave
is
him
producing something, I
Okay.
think. Yeah.
one. Rogue Squadron, which
That's still up in the air.
up in the air. The Acolyte.
That is a series.
Okay.
Like about a dark Jedi, I think.
Yeah.
That's probably not until 24, I think, at this point.
Yeah. So this all says 2023. So maybe it'd be late.
Maybe.
2023. I don't know.
And supposedly we were going to have that Rangers of the New Republic or
yeah,
something.
right.
I haven't heard
But
about
I don't
that
know
in
what's happening to that
forever.
because of the whole Cara Dune situation where that actress kind of got booted out. So.
Yeah, right.
Fire.
And she was supposed to be, I think,
She was kind of key.
the lead of that show.
Kind of key to that.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, if nothing else, like I said, we're getting Mando and Ahsoka. Like
Nothing bad. It's all good.
I mean, we're getting another season of an amazing series that we all love, and my favorite character getting.
There you go.
So.
Yeah. They better not mess it up.
Money
That's all I
coming
got
out
to
of my
say.
wallet.
Money coming out of the wallet.
I re-upped my Disney Plus for another year. Not that that's ever going to be in question. So. All right, hey, that does it for our Star Wars Spectacular. We'll do one little tech connecting type moment here in a moment. But first of all, before we wrap things up, I want to, as always, thank the sponsors of the TEConnect podcast, because this is the last episode of the year.
No, we got to rattle
Let's
them
give
off.
the rundown, because there's so many. I can't do this every episode.
That's
Remember
right.
them all. I'm always afraid I'm going to forget. I've got the list right here in front of me. So these are all folks that have sponsored our TEConnect program, which also sponsors the podcast, essentially. Elo, Zebra, Honeywell, Epson, Intel, Advantech, and Star. Thank you all so much for sponsoring this show.
Absolutely.
Sponsoring the TEConnect program. I guess actually I'll throw in Datalogic and HID Global in there also.
Yep, because they
they're
did a
TEConnect
couple.
program
Yep.
sponsors too. And then also thanks to some other folks that have helped us out along the way and provided some subject matter experts for us, like Code, Citizen, Seagull, Microtouch. Seriously, we appreciate
folks,
you
yeah.
guys. We love what you've done, that you're sponsoring the show. Hopefully you're getting what you need to get out of it. We appreciate all the amazing people that you have let us talk to in the past year.
Yeah, it's been a good one.
We're looking forward to another year. We're already starting to make some plans. We got some ideas for shows coming up in the new year.
Maybe some live stuff. Can I drop that?
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead. Let's throw it out there. What's happening? What are we doing next year?
I don't know. We'll see. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, we're gonna have a few TEConnect live. TEConnect podcast goes live episodes, like literally live, where
Like
you'll be
join
able to
us live, yes.
watch the episode as it's happening, and then we'll still film it and release it as well. But
all good stuff.
Keep your eye out on that. If you're not for any reason subscribed to like BlueStar's newsletters, if you're not following us on YouTube or on LinkedIn, make sure you're following us, because that's where you'll be kept appraised of all this fantastic stuff that we're going to be doing. Of course, as always, we want to hear from you, even if it's just your hot Star Wars takes or stuff that you want us to be talking about in the new year, guests you'd like us to have on the show, topics you want us to cover. First of all, there's always a link in the show notes to drop us some topic submissions. If you just recall, about a month or so back, we had one from one of our friends that reached out and asked us to talk about being a new VAR in the channel. We had that episode that came out and covered that. That's the kind of stuff we want to hear about. So tell us what you want to hear about on the show just for submitting a topic idea to. We will send you a TEConnect podcast t-shirt.
There you go. Boom.
It's not as cool as my Star Wars t-shirt, but it's
maybe
still
you need a Christmas gift to give somebody.
There you go. Yeah,
we can rush you a TEConnect podcast T-shirt, and you can give that to a loved
I'm not
one.
promising that. With this episode's coming out just a few days. Actually, I think this episode might be after Christmas. In fact,
okay. Well,
I don't remember the timeline right
post-Christmas,
now. So
yeah.
maybe you're shopping for next Christmas.
Next
You want to get a
Christmas,
jump on it,
There
or
you
you're
go.
shopping for Valentine's Day or something.
Anyway, it's a
nothing
comfy
says
shirt.
love like a TEConnect podcast T-shirt.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So submit your ideas, and we'll be happy to send you a shirt, even if we don't use the idea. But really, we want to hear from you and what you want about. You can also always keep connected with us and reach out to us on Twitter. We're at TEConnect Pod. You can also email us anytime, TEConnect@BlueStarInc.com. All right, let's wrap up here with a little special What's Tech Connecting segment.
Absolutely.
A big part of Star Wars.
Can't believe we
is
haven't gotten into this already.
Well, we've talked about the gadgets and the toys and the ships, I think. But let's talk about the visual effects. Star Wars was a pioneering, the original Star Wars trilogy pioneered a lot of amazing special effects.
Absolutely.
We've talked about how there's a lot of practical effects they pulled off. And obviously the prequels, George leaned into a lot of the CGI, early CGI, which hasn't aged well, but give him all the credit for
even doing
really try, because again, like if you watch like a modern Marvel movie, for instance, like those movies are rife with CGI in places where you don't even realize.
Don't even
CGI.
realize it now.
And I think
know.
it took someone like a Lucas to say like, hey, this is viable.
Yeah, we can do
even
this.
though it didn't look as good 20 years ago as it does now. You can build an entire movie out of
I think it
people standing
inspired.
in front of a green screen and nothing everything's going on around.
Inspired a whole new generation of folks saying, oh, yeah.
So the question I have is I wanted you to maybe tell us, one or two or more of some of your favorite VFX moments or shots or things that happened in any Star Wars movie or TV show. So Sam, I'll let you kick off here. What's some special effects stuff that have stood out to you?
Oh, dude, I don't know. I guess in like a sarcastic way, it'd have to be like in the Clone Wars and in the prequel movies, all the clones are just they're so dumb and they're just oh my god and they're just so like and Jar Jar Binks is such a funny stupid little in a sarcastic way. I just love
The quirkiness of all that.
The Clone Wars,
So you're looking at like ironic VFX.
Yes. The
like the VFX that makes you cringe and roll your eyes.
What is it? In the second prequel movie when all the clones are just like walking down the hill, and it literally looks like it was shot like in a Teletubbies like background. Like it's so like the sky is too blue and the ground is too
basically
green.
Everything in that shot was all CGI except maybe there may have been like one real person at the front or something.
The like ship thing coming just looks like a baguette, like just coming down, and I'm like, so funny, so good. So like, yes, my awful, horrible humor is just that's what I like.
Okay, I got you. Kind of like it makes me think of like. This is an early CGI Goro from the Mortal Kombat movie, the old Mortal Kombat movie.
Yeah.
You want to talk about some of the most awful CGI you've ever seen in a film, and for a very low budget film already. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, Dean. What about you?
I got two of them.
Okay.
So to me, because I was old enough to remember when New Hope came out, or the first one, the opening scene is the best. It's still to this day I can watch that. And, just the little
ships
ship
flying
out,
in,
and then the big ship. I mean, it's only maybe a minute. Tops, if that.
Maybe a couple,
But that was so, because the only thing that was out at that point was like Battlestar Galactica or something like that.
Actually, Battlestar Galactica, I think, was after Star Wars even.
Oh, was it? Okay.
It was inspired a lot
Could
by
have been. Yeah, I mean,
but
there
you
was
had
nothing looked
Gordon,
like that. Right? Which is hideous. Hideous visual
cheesy effects.
I mean, like a step above whatever. I can't remember the movie. But anyway, really bad visual effects.
Forbidden Planet.
Not good stuff. I mean, it's just, awesome to see that. It just set the tone so well for the movie, what was going to come up. It's like, oh my gosh, this is not like anything that I had ever seen before.
Because I was months old when the original Star Wars came out, and I'm pretty sure I probably saw it for the first time on TV or something. Like I distinctly remember seeing Return of the Jedi in the theater. I probably saw Empire also, but again, I would have been 3 at the time, so I don't remember it at all. But I can't imagine what that had to have felt like. To have sat in a theater and watched that come across the screen. First of all, you have the bombastic music, the big Star Wars, the crawl telling you the story thus far, and then suddenly here's a Corellian freighter and this giant triangular Star Destroyer.
You don't know any of that. But as a little boy sitting in movie theater, all that's like, what is going on here? Pew, pew, pew. It's like,
I would imagine I would have been watching that and just went, I'm in.
Yeah, right.
I don't care where this goes from here. I'm in. I'm here.
But then to appreciate what they actually had to do to pull that off.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
again, with
the visual
very
effects of
effects,
that. Nobody was doing stuff like that back then. I mean, it looked photorealistic. I mean, you felt like you were floating in space watching that.
I love seeing some of the old productions, photos and stuff, and like seeing the models and the sets that they built and how they painstakingly shot stuff. They could take weeks just to film. A couple minutes, like even a minute of footage of of a ship flying around or something.
Yeah. Now, then my number 2 is, now fast forward to Rogue One, the Battle of Scarif was, just that whole thing. You couldn't do that back in the original days, but even today, I mean, that is really, really good stuff.
Right.
I mean, just magical what they can do on screen with all. I mean, just the intricacies and how many ships are out there, and just the whole thing is like unbelievable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give you a few I have. So going back to the original trilogy, I think the Battle of Hoth, the battle with the Imperial walkers on Hoth.
Yes.
It's one of the in the special editions when they came out and they updated all the special effects, there was a little bit of tweaking they did to that because they didn't do much to Empire. That was the one movie they didn't bother touching because it's already a perfect movie. Come on.
Right.
And but what they did is they cleaned up a little bit of the special effects in that, so you couldn't quite, like occasionally there was like some bleed, like, if you were watching through the cockpit of one of the snow speeders, sometimes you'd see some bleed over effects of a walker where you shouldn't have been able to see it and stuff, and they cleaned up a lot of that. But even before all that sequence, like the stop motion animation and just the kineticness of that battle, and the setting and the snow speeders,
still works
the walkers
today.
And the people on the ground, like that was a scene. And then of course John Williams' music is all perfect at that point too. Like that was stuff that I remember watching that and thinking like, this is amazing. This is why I love this stuff. It's so cool to watch.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Another one I'll add, kind of going chronologically if stuff came out here, in The Force Awakens, which, granted, I have very mixed feelings about those movies too. But the scene when they steal the Falcon on Jakku and go for their flight through like the wrecked Death Star and the TIE fighters are following them, That whole sequence is amazing.
Isn't it amazing?
It's so again, an example of like what I remember and thinking was amazing about watching the Falcon flying around battling, TIE fighters and stuff back in the original trilogy, watching it with the newest version of special effects and how insanely fast it could move and just, the way the camera angles were changed and stuff. And some of that was just, that blew my mind. In fact, I was amazed by how much they showed of that sequence in the trailer because I'm like, man, this stuff is gold. And granted, you want to tease people in the trailer with really cool stuff. But that's one of those things like, man, I would have been fine not having seen that in the trailer at all and to come into this sequence blind, and I would have been blown away by that particular sequence in general.
For sure.
The Vader's assault in Rogue One when he takes out all the troops. Granted, there's not a lot of special effects there, but I think it was the fact that, like, that, again, to Sam's point earlier when you're talking about Vader and what he can and can't do, we'd always seen Vader as just the big guy in the bulky suit.
Yep.
Even, I mean, he very, appears very quickly in the end of, the prequels, the last film, just in time to come out and go, no, But, like, it was always a feeling of, like, look, I know this guy is supposed to be terrifying, and he's supposed to be able to move and be scary. And that whole sequence of him just ripping through those rebellion troops and just cutting them down, just walking through that hallway, and the way the lighting was done and his lightsaber lighting everything up.
All of Rogue One was honestly
it is.
It's the anamorphic camera and the 70 millimeter lens, just completely
good stuff.
I feel like Rogue One is the Star Wars movie that not enough people talk about, and yet anybody who I know who's a real Star Wars fan,
that's like their true
acknowledges like this is an amazing movie. Like you have to acknowledge how. Yes, it's a kind of a fill-in film. It doesn't tell you anything you kind of didn't already know.
Right.
And it's nothing really to do with the rest of the Skywalker story. But man, what a beautiful, amazingly well-done movie. And then the last thing I'll add, because it's something more recent, and this one I'm not going to get into too much detail, but they're in Andor, one of the latter episodes of Andor, because again, a show that's very grounded and not really about, space battles and laser guns and lightsabers and stuff. There's a brief kind of space battle that happens in the second to last episode, I think, with Luthen's character in particular, that I just thought was so well done. It was one of those sequences that I thought was so well done. When I reached the end of it, I rewound and watched that again because it was like a quick, maybe 3-minute sequence.
Yeah.
But it looked so good.
It did.
And I guess also because this was again where I liked Andor, because the special effects they dole out, have you watched the heist episode yet? Have you at least seen that where they pull off the heist?
Not yet.
Okay.
No, I'm very early on.
Because those effects are beautiful and amazing too. Actually, I probably should have singled that out too, because that whole sequence is just absolutely gorgeous. So they don't dole out the crazy special effects very often, but when they do, it's amazing. And that particular sequence towards the end of the series, so short and simple, really not significant in any way, but it was one of those things I was like, this was cool to see, because we hadn't really seen much of that in the series. And I was fine with that.
Very little.
But I was like, oh man, that was a neat little sequence there. That was my last one.
Good stuff.
Exactly.
Good stuff.
All right, that does it for us.
There you go. All right.
We've burned another hour and a half or so here of
next year
of Star Wars content. We'll be back again next year to do it all again with Mando Season 3, Ahsoka, whatever else comes out. So thank you so much, Sam, for joining us as always. Thank you to you for watching this year. We will be back probably sometime in January. Keep an eye out. We'll have new episodes coming soon. So thank you so much for watching. It is time for us to unplug for this episode for the year. Until next time, may the Force be with you. TEConnect Podcast is also brought to you by Elo. Are you looking for the kind of displays that stand out and help entice and engage customers?
Yes, you should be.
Well, look no further than Elo's large format interactive digital signage.
Nice.
With size options from 32 to 65 inches, Elo offers touchscreens that add brilliant interactive canvases to any environment with sleek, slim designs built to withstand the rigors of continuous commercial use. There's another little sci-fi throwback. You see a lot of screens in sci-fi that are like old CRT screens.
Well, I was just about to go there. I feel bad for the people of Star Wars on the visual effects side that have to keep living in this 3:4 aspect ratio. It's like, no, you wouldn't have had that. It's okay.
It goes to show you that even the
I think Elo needs to start giving them screens so that they can just put it into their,
It goes to show you that even the imagination of science fiction couldn't produce stuff that looks anywhere close to the displays and screens that we have now.
There you go.
But then again, also, it was probably there was no good way they could replicate it either, because if you actually wanted a video feed running through a screen, you just had to use the technologies available. available at the time.
Yes.
So
yeah. Fair enough.
Too bad, so ELO, you can be the touchscreens of the future there.
Yes.
Maybe when they redo Star Wars for like the 80th time, they can
ELO should be a sponsor.
ELO touchscreens in there and all.
Touch them. Yeah.
Now we know that ELO prides itself on modularity and choice for any need. Here are just a few options that are available with their large format screens. PCAP or infrared touch technology.
Nice.
Anti-friction glass. Touch-through capability. So you could have like maybe some glass over it to touch through it.
Touch
Pretty
through
cool.
it. Nice.
4K options, computer modules, and Edge Connect peripherals.
Boom.
Lots of great stuff.
Oh, and by the way, that last part's really important. Edge Connect.
Yeah, exactly. ELO backs all of this up with a minimum 3-year warranty and optional on-site exchange if service is needed. Check out the link in the show notes to browse the options, specs, and to buy Star Wars. TEConnect podcast is brought to you by Zebra. All right, guys, so one of my favorite things I think about Star Wars is, especially some of the newer stuff, is they're still using tech that kind of looks a little 70s and antiquated-ish.
Yeah.
Even though you would think it should all be shiny and new, some of it actually looks older than the tech that we actually use right now, doesn't it?
Right? A little bit.
I think that's kind of fun. Yeah. But let's be honest, in the modern world, you want some more modern technology. It looks a little better than kind of the weird green screen data pad stuff they might be using in Star Wars. So Zebra's got you covered here. They got some tech that looks a little more modern, and probably would fit in what Star Wars would really be like. Introducing the TC53 and TC58, the first members of a new generation of Zebra mobile computers designed to do more. Now, what makes these devices so different? There's new hardware that redefines mobile computing performance, new solutions and sensor technologies, as well as the latest and fastest wireless technologies, including 5G, Wi-Fi 6E, and CBRS. They redefine the world of possibilities. A class-leading full HD plus 6-inch display helps workers to see more, do more, and scroll less. Man, if the Empire actually did have this kind of technology, the Rebellion probably would have been stamped down in no time.
So thank God they didn't get it.
Sure, they had starships and blasters and stuff or whatever,
but they didn't have all those connections and stuff like that.
Their tech looks pretty old school. It looks like what we were using back in the 80s instead.
Yeah, for sure.
With Zebra-only mobility DNA tools, the TC53 and TC58 deliver a built-in advantage, maximizing user productivity while minimizing IT complexities throughout the entire device lifecycle. Also, new manufacturing technologies make them thinner yet even more rugged. The TC53 and TC58 mobile computers offer a new generation of data collection, a new level of operational efficiency, and a new level of workforce productivity, driving new possibilities into the world of mobility for the folks that aren't trying to start a galactic empire and thwart everyone in the galaxy. To learn more and find resources like spec sheets, a battle card, and more tools to help you sell, check out the link in the show notes.